ॐ श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादशङ्करं लोकशङ्करं। त्वमेव माता च पिता त्वमेव बन्धुश्च सखा त्वमेव विद्या द्रविणं त्वमेव सर्वं मम देवदेव। श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तिसुदेशिकेन्द्रं द्वैपायनं सूत्रकृतं मुनीन्द्रं श्रीशङ्करं भाष्यकृतं यतीन्द्रं मद्देशिकञ्चापि नमामि विद्यै। ॐ नमो ब्रह्मादिभ्यो ब्रह्मविद्यासम्प्रदायकर्तृभ्यो वंशऋषिभ्यो महद्भ्यो नमो गुरुभ्यः। सर्वोपप्लवरहितप्रज्ञानगणः प्रत्यगर्तो ब्रह्मैवाहमस्मि। Pranams everyone. So in this introduction to Vedanta series, we saw the human goals: Artha, Kama, Dharma, Moksha. Moksha being the ultimate goal that every jiva has to look for. I mean, that is what each one of us will have to aspire for. That is the final goal. Artha, Kama, Dharma are all incidental goals. So for this, sadhanas have been prescribed in our scriptures. The three main sadhanas are Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga and Jnana Yoga. Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga are preparatory sadhanas so that a person can come to Jnana Yoga and get moksha. Moksha is defined as emotional independence. Moksha is defined as a person who is able to be happy at all times. So this is moksha. Of course, the other moksha, this is called as Jivan Mukti. Then there is also Videha Mukti. Videha Mukti is moksha where there will not be any more birth for us. So we will be coming out of this birth and death cycle. So we will not be. So as any jiva, we have had births. We will be having births again, and the body that we take in this janma is human form. In previous janmas or in the next janmas, we don't know what sort of body we will get. So to come out of this cycle, the only way to come out of this cycle is only if we get moksha. And with regards to moksha, with regards to this, we said the Jnana Yoga is the sadhana which will give direct moksha. And Jnana Yoga as a sadhana is to understand three concepts: the concept of self, the concept of this world, and this concept of Ishvara. And understand these three concepts completely, assimilate, make it your personality. And when we understand, we also understand the differences or the similarities between these three. Jiva Vichara, Ishvara Vichara and Jagat Vichara. And as I said, from last class onwards, we will be kind of going into this Shravanam, the concept of understanding the Shastras better. And the first one, even before we come to the stage of understanding Jiva, doing a Jiva Vichara or a Ishvara Vichara, I said to start off, we need to understand about Bhakti. Bhakti is devotion. Devotion is defined as love towards a higher principle. And this love can be classified or categorized into three: love towards the goals, love towards the means to achieve that goal, and love towards oneself. And we saw that the love towards means is the lowest form of love. Love towards goals is a higher form of love, but the highest form of love is love towards oneself. And if we apply the same concept of this love on bhakti towards Ishvara, then we find that most of us are using Ishvara as a means for us to achieve Artha, Kama. We use Ishvara. We pray to Ishvara. We do bhakti to achieve the end result, which is in the form of Artha or Kama. And most of this Artha or Kama can be also classified into two. One is Sukha Prapti. The second one is Dukkha Nivritti. So we seek joy and pleasure from this world, and therefore we do not want any sorrow or pain. And if we are in sorrow or pain, we pray to Ishvara to relieve us from that, and we seek Ishvara's blessings for getting us joy and pleasure. So Ishvara is now a sadhana for us. That is the first level of bhakti. And this is called as Manda Bhakti. Then the Madhyama Bhakti, the second level of bhakti, is where Ishvara becomes the goal. Ishvara becomes the goal. Ishvara is also the sadhana. The means is also Ishvara. The goal is also Ishvara. So in this case, we are not bothered about the joy or pleasure or the sorrow or the pain that we are going to get. We are only focused on reaching Ishvara. This is the second step or the second form of bhakti. Then the third one is Uttama Bhakti, where I recognize Ishvara as Atma, as self. This bhakti is only possible for a Mukta Purusha. Only for a person who has attained moksha, this bhakti is possible, where he is able to identify Ishvara as himself, or him to be no different from Ishvara. Bhagavan calls this bhakta as Parabhakta. He also calls this person as Sthita Prajna. In Bhagavad Gita, he calls him as Parabhakta, Sthita Prajna, Jnani. He uses various terms. In this class, we will be using the term Jnani. So Jnani is a Mukta Purusha. So this is the first form of bhakti. Panditaha. That is the second chapter, 11th sloka. He calls this person also calls as Panditaha. So Panditaha is another term for this Mukta Purusha in Bhagavad Gita. So this is the first definition of bhakti. As I said, bhakti, there are two definitions. One is bhakti as a sadhana. Then the second one is bhakti as a course of discipline. So course of discipline meaning bhakti as a yoga. So we have now seen karma yoga, upasana yoga, jnana yoga. Then if people might have some questions, then what is bhakti yoga? In fact, in Bhagavad Gita, an entire chapter is called as Bhakti Yoga. 12th chapter of Gita is called as Bhakti Yoga. So Bhakti Yoga means it's a course of discipline. So if it is a course of discipline, what is the goal that we will achieve through that course of discipline? Number one. Number two, which means is it a fourth course of discipline other than Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga and Jnana Yoga? Is this a separate one? And if it is a separate one, what do we achieve out of it? The answer the scriptures give is Bhakti Yoga is not an exclusive or a separate course of discipline at all. Bhakti yoga is actually the entire group of disciplines together, consisting of all these three, karma, upasana and jnana yoga, put together is called as bhakti yoga. So this threefold course of karma, upasana and jnana put together is called as bhakti yoga. So the first stage of bhakti yoga is karma yoga, the second stage of bhakti yoga is upasana yoga, final stage of bhakti yoga is jnana yoga. And why do we call this as bhakti yoga altogether? Because bhakti is the common theme is across all these three yogas. Bhakti is not practiced as a separate sadhana. Karma yoga, upasana yoga and jnana yoga have to be imbued in bhakti. In karma yoga, when we are doing this action, we dedicate all actions to Ishvara. So there is bhakti involved in it. And when we accept anything that comes out of our actions, the results of the actions, we take it as Ishvara Prasada. Again, Bhagavan is involved. So there cannot be a karma yoga without Bhagavan or without Ishvara. And therefore, so whatever action we do, a karma yogi, whatever action he does, he dedicates that action to Ishvara or Bhagavan. So he cannot be without bhakti at all. And similarly, when he is receiving the consequences of his actions, he takes it as Ishvara Prasada. And therefore he is close to Ishvara at that time also. So bhakti, karma yoga has bhakti as the central theme, common theme. Then in upasana yoga, we meditate upon Ishvara for developing this mental discipline and integration. We talked about Manasa Puja, Manasa Parayanam, Manasa Japa. All this is towards Ishvara. So Upasana Yoga also has to take place in the atmosphere of Bhakti. And Jnana Yoga, that also involves Bhakti. Before studying scriptures, we pray to Ishvara. And when during this study of scriptures, we inquire into our true nature. We inquire upon the nature of Ishvara. And then we discover Ishvara, we discover self as part of this sadhana. So discovering Ishvara involves bhakti. So then at no point of time we are away from bhakti. And therefore all these three yogas put together is called as Bhakti Yoga. And this is the second meaning of Bhakti. The first Bhakti is where we have a sadhana to actually consider Ishvara as a means to attain worldly benefit. And then if we consider Bhakti as a yoga, as a course of discipline, then it is Karma, Upasana and Jnana Yoga. So Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga, we talked about 3 steps of Bhakti, right? One is Manda Bhakti, Madhyama Bhakti and Uttama Bhakti. Artha Arthartha Bhakti, where a person is looking for Sukha Prapti or Dukkha Nivritti, is Manda Bhakti. Doing Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga is Madhyama Bhakti, because we do that because we want to attain Bhagavan, we want to attain moksha, and therefore that is Madhyama Bhakti. Jnana Yoga is about discovering oneself to be no different from Ishvara, and therefore that is Uttama Bhakti. So long as we are looking for materialistic benefits from this world and use Ishvara as a means to achieve those materialistic goals, then it is Manda Bhakti. Do not take it wrong. This is also considered as Bhakti. Ishvara accepts this as also a Bhakta. This person also as a Bhakta. But he says it is Manda Bhakti. You will have to mature and move away from using Ishvara as a means and come to the stage where you are having Ishvara as the goal. So that is Madhyama Bhakti. And then finally we will have to strive to understand the real nature of oneself and the nature of Ishvara, and be able to understand, assimilate that Jiva Ishvara na paraha. There is no difference between Jiva and Ishvara. So now we have Bhakti, we have seen Bhakti, and we said we have to use Ishvara. Then the question is, without understanding the principle of Ishvara, how can I get devotion? So we say Bhakti is devotion, we need to get Bhakti. So without understanding the concept of Ishvara, how is it possible to get devotion? Because devotion is nothing but love. An integral part of love is the object of love. And we will not get love without understanding what it is. So the more we understand, either we get more love or probably we might get an aversion also. But to get love, one needs to have more understanding. As we understand more, we get more love. And that is why if we want to improve our bhakti, we need to understand Ishvara. The jnanam of Ishvara is a necessity. It becomes a necessity. Only when I am able to understand Ishvara better, my love towards Ishvara will increase. And therefore we have to understand Ishvara. And to understand Ishvara, before we come to that final stage of jnanam, where we are able to do a vichara on Ishvara, at the lowest level for a Manda Bhakta, Ishvara is defined in a particular manner. And actually there are three definitions of Ishvara depending on the level that we are in, depending on the maturity of our spirituality, depending on the intellectual caliber of the person. Scriptures give us three definitions of Ishvara. All three are valid. All three are valid at that level. But as a person matures, he goes from the first to the second definition, and from the second to the third definition. The first definition of Ishvara is Jagat Karana Ishvara. First definition becomes Jagat Karta Ishvara. Jagat Karta Ishvara. Ishvara is the creator of this world. This universe has been created by Ishvara. This is the first definition. it is a easily understandable definition. Any person who is having a reasonable amount of common sense or reasoning ability would agree to this definition. Because in this world, if we take any well-designed product, any well-designed instrument, or any well-designed object, and if look, any purposeful well-designed object, product will or must have an intelligent being to design that object. So if I look at an Apple phone, there has to be a designer. If I look at a car, beautiful car, there has to be a designer. Beautiful house, there has to be a designer. Even a beautiful pot, there has to be a designer. Necklace, there has to be a designer. Every object in this world, whatever we take, if it is well designed, if it is designed, it has to have a designer. It has to have an intelligent cause behind it. And the more well designed the product is, the more we appreciate the design intelligence behind it. Steve Jobs is well known, and we appreciate Steve Jobs because of the excellent design that he brought in the phones. So if any of these ordinary products that we see in this world requires an intelligence, then what to talk of this most wonderful universe, which is very well designed and very purposeful. The sun being in the center, planets revolving around it, the earth going through a particular axis only, the earth rotating every 24 hours and not falling off, not going attracted to the sun. None of the planets bump with each other. Everything has its own path. The moon revolving around the earth, so many stars, and sunlight actually nourishing this earth. Without sunlight we will not survive. The right amount of oxygen that is available in this planet, the plants and the ecological cycle that we have in this world, in this earth. So many insects, plants, animals, and then human being, and all these none of the objects in this universe, none of it is purposeless. Everything has got a purpose. Some of the purpose we may not have identified yet, science may not have understood yet, but even weed has a purpose. Everything in this world has a purpose. And therefore, and this human body, it's been able to take food, being able to convert that into blood, and it is being able to excrete the waste. It is able to operate, and the things, the heart, the lungs, liver, everything is well designed. Who put that in together in the first place? How is it possible? How is it possible that it can all come of its own? Even to make a small nail, we need an intelligent being behind it, and we need somebody to design it. So therefore, this world, which is so wonderfully designed, has to have a creator, and that intelligent creator, we call that intelligent creator to be Ishvara. And therefore we say Jagat Karta Ishvara. And this is common definition of Ishvara across all religions, across all schools of thought. Always they say God is the creator. So every religion accepts that there is a creator behind it. And once I define Ishvara as Jagat Karta, our normal tendency is that we will start visualizing Ishvara as a person, because we are used to thinking that intelligent beings as human beings or persons, we always think if there is somebody who is defined is intelligent, then we try to create a human form out of it. Therefore we imagine this intelligent Ishvara who is actually omniscient and omnipotent, and since we are not able to see him also, we just place him above the clouds somewhere. And this person, we give him a form, human form, and we give him we make it personal, and that Ishvara is called as, in scriptural terms, is called as Eka Rupa Ishvara, a form Ishvara. And we have different names for those forms. So this is the first definition of Ishvara, Jagat Karta Ishvara. Ishvara as the intelligent principle behind this creation. Now, what is the second definition of Ishvara? So this is for the Manda Bhaktas. As we mature spiritually, we start to understand that Ishvara is Jagat Karana Ishvara. Ishvara as the cause of this world, cause of this universe. Once we are able to accept that, once we are able to understand that Ishvara is the creator, we move to the second stage, as Ishvara as the cause of this world. Suppose I understand Ishvara as the creator, as the intelligent being behind the creation. Then the next question that would rise in our mind is, what is the raw material that was used to make this world? What is the raw material? What is the material cost behind this creation? Because before the creation, nothing was available in this world. Ishvara alone was there, and he created this universe. Nothing was there, not even space, not even time. Very difficult to conceive this now. Scientists say even before Big Bang there was no concept of space and time. So, as part of this creation, in which space was created, time was created, all these intelligent beings like human beings were created, animals created, this sun, moon, stars, earth, all the planets were created. What is the raw material for them? Where is the raw material? That would be the next question that would arise in our mind. And scriptures point out that Ishvara himself happens to be the very raw material. Ishvara is the Karana. Upadana Karana, the very material out of which the world is created. And the analogy or the example that the scriptures give is just as the spider finds the material for the web out of itself, Ishvara is the material cause of this universe also. The scriptures extend that and then say the raw materials become the product. So Ishvara is the material, this universe is the product. So Ishvara is the raw material that became this world, that has been converted into this world. This concept, again, in our scriptures, there will be multiple. In our scriptures, it doesn't just say this. There will be a lot of counter questions. There will be a lot of tarkas, logically proving that this is the truth. Right now, we will not go into those things. But as a reasonable, as a person with common sense, we can agree that for creating something, we cannot create out of nothing. And when Ishvara was there, the only thing that was available to Ishvara was himself, and therefore it is only natural that he became the raw material. And how is it possible that somebody can become the raw material? We gave the example of spider spinning its web out of itself. And therefore we can say this universe is nothing but Ishvara alone. And that is what across so many generations in our culture, we say, where is Ishvara? We say Ishvara is everywhere. We don't say Ishvara is sitting there at the top of the clouds next to someone and watching us from there. We say, you go to a village, ask somebody, where is Ishvara, where is Bhagavan? He will say everywhere. Not that he has studied scriptures, but that has been the how our culture has actually taken it forward for generations. So where is Ishvara? Ishvara is everywhere. The whole universe is Ishvara. Since the whole universe is Ishvara, every form I see is Ishvara. Every form that I see is Ishvara. So which means Ishvara does not have one form now. All forms are Ishvara's forms. All forms are Ishvara's forms. So he is no more my personal Ishvara in a specific form, but he is a universal Ishvara. He is no more the Ekarupa Ishvara, he is Anekarupa Ishvara, multiple forms. Or in other words, we say Vishwarupa Ishvara. And where can we find him? Where can we find Ishvara? We find him everywhere. We know we can find him everywhere. Isn't that the reason why when we actually pray to Ishvara, we pray within our mind? We pray within our mind, and yet we believe, we trust Ishvara will hear us. And isn't that because we believe that he is around us, he is everywhere? And therefore we have this, we know implicitly, we always believe that Ishvara is everywhere. And that is the reason why in our culture, everything is prayed upon. Everything is divine. Rivers are divine, mountains are divine, trees are divine, even some animals are divine, insects are divine, cow is divine, elephants are divine. Snakes are divine. Stones are divine. Rivers, Ganga, Yamuna, Kaveri, everything is divine. Even the laptop, phone, everything becomes divine on Vijayadashami. On Ayudha Puja day, we pray everything. We consider everything to be Ishvara. Our culture is such that we know that everything around us is Ishvara. So this is not there in the other religions. And that's why in our religion, if we drop in a paper on the floor and we accidentally step on it, we will take it onto our eyes and seek forgiveness, because it is Saraswati. Money is Lakshmi. Wealth is Lakshmi. Everything, we have created a form to understand, but everything is Ishvara for us. So Jagat Karana Ishvara. So the first one was Jagat Karta Ishvara. The second one is Jagat Karana Ishvara. So Ishvara has become the world. The first stage, Ishvara created this world. Now we agree Ishvara became this world. Now this is the second definition. Now the third definition becomes for mature spiritual seekers. This is a difficult definition to understand. And this definition is, Ishvara is the substratum of the world. Ishvara is the Adhisthana of this world. Jagat Adhisthana Ishvara. This is the highest and the toughest culmination of the definition of Ishvara. So here we do not say Ishvara became the world. We do not say that. Again, as I said, everything is valid at that level. Ishvara became the world is valid at one level. But once a person comes to this stage, we do not say Ishvara became the world. We say Ishvara is the substratum on which the world has been manifested. The world has manifested itself on Ishvara. Because why do we not say that Ishvara became the world? Because the next question that would come is, so many things, ugly things are in this world. Are these things also Ishvara? Are these bad elements also Ishvara? At one stage, yes, it is. But for a mature seeker, if this question comes in, then we become a mature seeker, and then at that point of time we say Jagat Adhisthana Ishvara. Ishvara is the substratum on which the world is manifested. So Ishvara, in this case, what happens is Ishvara appears as the world. Ishvara does not become the world, but he appears as the world with different forms. But he himself is not affected by any form in which he appears. So he appears as this world, but he himself is not affected by any of the forms that the world appears to be. Ishvara is the very substratum of the forms. And he transcends the forms. All the forms, he transcends the forms. He is the ultimate reality. Ishvara is the ultimate reality. So Ishvara is the ultimate stuff behind the creation, but he himself is not affected by them. So that is called as Jagat Adhishtana Ishvara. What is the example that we can give? The example, gold and ornaments. Different ornaments exist. But every ornament is only a name and form for the gold. The gold itself is still there. The one piece of gold can be turned into a necklace or a bracelet or a chain, whatever. Even this is not a great example, I would think. Even this gold and necklace is not a great example for this Adhishtana. The best example for Adhishtana is rope and snake, which we will see it in a later class. I will tell you about the rope and snake example, where you would be able to understand this Jagat Adhishtana Ishvara. But right now we can take it as Ishvara to be the substratum of this universe, and this name and form of this universe will not affect the Ishvara himself. Ishvara transcends all these superficial forms of this creation. He will transcend all these superficial forms of creation. He does not have any particular form. And that Ishvara is called as Jagat Adhishtana Ishvara. And this Ishvara is Arupa Ishvara. Initially we saw Ekarupa Ishvara, then we saw Vishwarupa Ishvara. Now he becomes Arupa. He is formless. So when we are in the initial stage of our spiritual path, in the initial stages, we consider we have to follow Ekarupa Bhakti. We consider Ishvara to be a formed Ishvara so that we are able to bring him into our mind, meditate upon him. And as we progress, we should start seeing Ishvara as Aneka Rupa Ishvara. Our bhakti should be Aneka Rupa Bhakti. And then as we progress even further, in the final stage, it is Arupa Bhakti. Ishvara does not have any form. So this is the three definitions for Ishvara. Each of them are valid. Now the next question that might come to us is, when I get to the next level of knowledge, when I get to the next level of knowledge of Ishvara, will it displace my earlier knowledge of Ishvara? Will it displace? Will I negate the previous definition of Ishvara? Because we talk about these three stages gradually. But what we will know is that as we progress spiritually, we will not displace the former ones. It is only a different dimension. If I see Ishvara from that dimension, I will still see Ishvara as Jagat Karta Ishvara. At another dimension, I will see Ishvara as Jagat Karana Ishvara. And another dimension, it is Jagat Adhishtana Ishvara. So the person who has come to Arupa Bhakti, one who becomes Arupa Bhakta, will not still lose Vishwarupa Bhakti in him, or will not lose Ekarupa Bhakti in him. He will be able to do all the three. Arupa Bhakti will include the other two also. That is why we can see, and this Arupa Bhakti is very specific to Advaita Vedanta. And this Arupa Bhakta will also include the other two Bhakti. And that's why we can see even the greatest Vedantin like Kanchi Mahapariva or Ramana Maharishi or Jnanananda Swami, they will all be able to worship Ishvara in other forms also, in any form also. They know Ishvara is Arupa, but they would be able to invoke Ishvara in any form. They will happily appreciate Ishvara as this beautiful nature, as well as in a single form, or also they could also appreciate Ishvara as one who has transcended, as that which has transcended all these forms. So the higher nature, the higher one goes, they will not still displace the lower natures or lower definitions of Ishvara. As they go higher, they will just add one more dimension to Ishvara. This is the understanding of Ishvara that we develop as we study the scriptures. As we study the scriptures, we will see that we will move from Ekarupa to Anekarupa to Arupa. So this is definition of Ishvara. Now to consolidate this, so far what we have studied under Bhakti, first three we saw Manda Bhakti, Madhyama Bhakti and Uttama Bhakti. And Bhakti there is defined as love towards Ishvara, love of Ishvara. So that is what we saw first. So Bhavana Drishtya Bhakti Trayam, from the aspect of Bhavana that we have, from the aspect of attitude that we show towards Ishvara, Bhakti can be classified into three. We saw that first. Then we saw Bhakti as Yoga. So Karma Yoga Rupa Bhakti, Upasana Yoga Rupa Bhakti and Jnana Yoga Rupa Bhakti. Where in this stage Bhakti is defined in this standpoint of sadhana. So there it was attitude, here it is sadhana. So sadhana drishtya Bhakti Trayam. So that also we saw. Then finally we saw Bhakti can be also classified into Ekarupa Bhakti, Anekarupa Bhakti and Arupa Bhakti, depending on the understanding of Ishvara, depending on my understanding of Ishvara. So Devata Drishtya Bhakti Trayam. So first one was Bhavana Drishtya Bhakti Trayam, then Sadhana Drishtya Bhakti Trayam, now Devata Drishtya Bhakti Trayam. So there are, to summarize, we have seen these 9 elements or 9 forms of Bhakti. So anytime we talk about Bhakti, it could be one of these 9. We have to understand, or there could be a combination as well. So Bhakti, as I said, just like karma, yoga, dharma, it is a term that it's got multiple meanings depending on the context, and we have tried to do some vichara on this Bhakti so far. I hope this was clear. In the next class, we would be going towards the qualifications that one need to have for a person to understand and do vichara on self. So this Jnana Yoga, if a person has to pursue, this person will have to have certain qualifications. And those qualifications we will see in the next class. Any questions on this so far, on this topic of Bhakti? Why Ishvara has created this world? This can be only answered if we come to the third level. And in the third level, we will see that The creation itself is a mithya. It is only a mirage like of thing. It is more, it doesn't exist in the first place. It is as real, let me put this way, this creation is as real as we have our dreams. So that is how it will be defined finally, and therefore we can say that there was no creation in the first place at all. Okay. There was a question last class. Why is it so difficult to get moksha? Moksha is not difficult to get. What is difficult to get is the qualifications that is needed for attaining moksha. Moksha by itself, to say who we are, to explain who we are, to explain who is Ishvara, and to understand these concepts of this Jagat is not that difficult. The difficulty is when we have to say, control your mind. Make sure that the mind becomes pure. Make sure that the mind is free of likes and dislikes. Make sure the mind is free of hatred, jealousy, pride, ego. That is where the difficulty comes. To make us prepared for moksha is the difficult thing. Moksha by itself is not very difficult. And why is that difficult? Because why is to get those qualities difficult? Because we have been with these qualities in our mind for so many births. So it takes a lot of time for us to change. Just like, in an old well, if a brass or a copper vessel is dropped and it is lying there for say 200-300 years, and then you will have to pick it up one day and then clean it. It doesn't get cleaned in the first attempt. It takes multiple days of cleansing. Use, cleanse, and then only finally it will get back its original color. In the same manner, our minds have been tainted for so many births. And we are continuing to get tainted. And therefore, to actually change this and make our mind pure, it will take a lot of effort. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of effort and it takes time. And therefore, it looks as if moksha is difficult. I hope I understand. I explained that. Hari Om. Any other question? Okay. Are there new spirits born? Is that new? Yeah. Are there new spirits born? When you say spirits, I would take it, I believe you consider it as jiva, as each living object or living being. We don't use the concept of souls and others when we hear. I will try to explain the concept of soul later on when we discuss Atma. But right now we'll say jiva. So are there multiple jivas? So each one is a jiva, each human being is a jiva, each ant is a jiva, each plant is a jiva, each insect is a jiva. So are there new jivas born? No. There are no new jivas born. The number of jivas in this world is a constant. Except every time it gets reduced by one jiva less, if we can say so. If a person attains moksha, then he is no more a jiva in this world. That jivatma merges with Paramatma. And therefore there is one jiva less. But then how does it merging happens? We will see it later. This merging is different from the merging that is explained in Visishta Dvaita and Dvaita. Okay. I hope. Hari Om. Any other question? Population is increasing. Yes. The population is increasing because we haven't seen the total Jiva count, right? Did we see whether the ants count has increased? Did we see the housefly, snakes, lion, tiger? So there could be these insects which will take the form of human beings. And in our next birth, we could take another form. We could take another body. We could be another insect. We could be a cow. We could be a goat. We could be a snake. We could be a lizard. We could be a cockroach. So the total count of all the jivas will be a constant. Hari Om. What were dinosaurs? Yeah, I mean, they have taken another form. The forms can change. 70, 80 years back, we could have seen a design in jewelry which is not there today. And what we see as design in jewelry today may not be there in another 50 years' time. So the forms could change, but the underlying jiva is the same. The underlying gold is still the same. The gold which was there in a necklace for 70 years back is in a new form today. That's all. So what was dinosaurs? Dinosaurs was a name and form. That form has changed. The jiva is the same. Interesting questions though. Yeah. Any other? If a jiva gets moksha by merging with Ishvara, can please explain how it is constant? Now, as I said, I mean, the total jivas get reduced by the number of people who attain moksha. So, as I said, that number is only changed when a jiva attains moksha. So, the number of jiva goes down in that case. Hari Om. Is that okay? Did I answer? Was there somebody else typing? Any more questions? Okay. We will see in the next class. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi स्वस्ति प्रजाभ्यः परिपालयन्तां न्यायेन मार्गेण महीं महिषाः गोब्राह्मणेभ्यो शुभमस्तु नित्यं लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु हरि ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः।